This is WFYI News Now. It's February 25th, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, the conclusion to a Statehouse bill that would have made street camping illegal, a stripped-down version of a bill to reform prior authorization, and Governor Mike Braun says he'll veto major property tax reform legislation if it doesn't improve during the legislative session.
To that, I would say, well, welcome to what it's like to not always get your way.
Those stories coming up. But first, Governor Mike Braun is tasking his wife, First Lady Maureen Braun, with keeping Indiana's Dolly Parton Imagination Library program alive. The program provides free books every month to children from birth to age 5. The state began providing funding for it to spread statewide in 2023, $6 million total. Both Mike Braun's budget proposal and the version approved by House Republicans eliminate that funding, which amounts to a little more than 1/100% of the state budget. Mike Braun says his wife Maureen Braun, a longtime small business owner, will lead an effort to identify other funding sources to keep the program alive. He says that will include working with philanthropic groups. In a statement, Maureen Braun said she's confident she and the state's strong community partners will find a solution. A bill that would have made street camping illegal died in the Indiana House. WFYI's Elizabeth Gabriel reports some legislators hope to create a task force to study homelessness across the state.
The amended version of House Bill 1662 would have made street camping for more than 24 hours a Class C misdemeanor, which includes 60 days in jail and a fine up to $500. But House Speaker Todd Houston says there wasn't enough support on both sides of the full House to push the legislation forward.
I'm pretty committed to working with the bill and the bill authors to find the right language. I think there's language that we can get to that I think could have bipartisan support. We just weren't there yet.
Advocates for people experiencing homelessness said the bill would create barriers for nearly 5,000 people without a home and take away resources from where they're needed. I'm Elizabeth Gabriel.
The Indiana Senate approved a stripped-down version of a prior authorization reform bill Thursday. The legislation was heavily amended over fiscal concerns. But as Indiana Public Broadcasting's Abigail Ruman reports, the author of the bill says he disagrees with the fiscal analysis.
Senator Tyler Johnson proposed prior authorization reform last year, but the bill didn't get a hearing in the Senate Appropriations Committee due to concerns about the cost being more than $1 billion. This year's bill made it to the Senate floor, but the same committee removed almost all of the policies with a fiscal component. Johnson says he worked with fiscal experts on this year's legislation and expected the cost to be pennies on the dollar. However, this year's estimate came back with a similar cost to the state.
I still wholeheartedly reject that estimate. We have a lot of work to do here. The numbers just don't add up, nor do they reflect the new bill that we've put forward.
Johnson says the current state of the bill addresses some issues with prior authorization, but he still wants to make more meaningful reforms for Hoosier patients. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Abigail Ruman.
The bill now heads to the House. And for our final story today, Governor Mike Braun says he'll veto major property tax reform legislation if it doesn't improve as the session continues. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports legislative leaders say that threat makes their work more difficult.
The initial property tax measure was Braun's proposal, rolling back homeowners' property tax bills to 2021 levels while costing local governments and schools billions of dollars. The version the Senate passed is more targeted at older Hoosiers, disabled veterans, and first-time homebuyers, providing $1.4 billion in tax savings over 3 years. Senate GOP leader Roderick Bray says Braun's veto threat brings challenges.
But we're going to keep our head down and try and craft a policy that works for the state of Indiana.
Senate Democratic leader Shelley Yoder says Braun has put his party in a pickle.
To that, I would say, well, welcome to what it's like to not always get your way.
The legislative session will resume March 3rd. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the Statehouse.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by Drew Daudelin and Zach Bundy, with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.